This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and MV Velman.
It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, episode 11. We're coming up to the championship. It's very close now. Tomorrow the Boks will announce their team for the games against Wallaby this weekend. And as usual, Harry is here. How's it, Harry?
Goeiemôre MV. Hoe gaan het met jou?
Yeah, het gaan baie goed, baie dankie. I was wondering if I should say hoe gaan het or whether I should say how's it. But I thought, in the interest of our international audience, let's keep it English, sort of English. So
One of my favorite comments on our explosive episode was some guy telling me that I pronounced MV correctly. And I was like, yes.
Yeah. I even had to train the AI to pronounce my name properly because it doesn't know how to pronounce it in Afrikaans. So yeah, there we go. I wanted to talk to you about this Rugby Championship, and you and I had a bit of a heated discussion almost, for what would pass as a heated discussion for us. I was thinking, what's Rassie's approach to this championship? What would he want from this championship? And you and I, we differ a bit on that.
I think the reason why we sit here today with a Springbok team that has, 957 caps and it's probably its first 15 and 1,006 caps in its second is because Rassie did not approach Rugby Championships or end-of-year tours or July Test Series as anything other than games he'd like to win, but he doesn't have to win because it's incidental to the big cause, which is when it comes around to 2027 and we're in January and we're talking about the World Cup, he wants to have the caps bedded. He wants to have identifiable second string. He wants to anticipate for injuries. So whilst I'm not ever going to say that any Boks coach, and certainly not Rassie, plans to lose or is okay with losing, I think the objectives are more about finding, that the replacement for number 8, for number 7, for number 6, define who the second string is on 10, win some, beat Argentina, maybe split with Australia. And if the price you pay to split with them and lose one is that you find that, Ben Jason Dixon is not up to it, or he is, then that's something he wants to know. Other thing would be, correction of specific performance flaws that were unearthed against Ireland. So like let's look and see what we can do to change it. And even if the score ends up being 28-27 in Brisbane and we lose by 1, but the things that they thought went wrong against Ireland are fixed, and you have other people to bring in later to fix other stuff, like the lineout maybe goes bizarre. I don't think Rassie's going to be too worried, and I think he can survive that. I think every other coach has a problem. I mean, if that happened to the other guys in the championship, they might be under heat, but Rassie has so much credit in the bank. Maybe it's wrong. Maybe it's unfair. Maybe what I'm talking about should not be true. But I think he can survive a mediocre Rugby Championship again.
Yeah, this is where we differ. I think not for the sake of anything other than the fact that the other teams all have new coaches starting. Razor is under, any New Zealand coach is under immense scrutiny and pressure for that matter. Joe Schmidt is now trying to fix what Eddie Jones broke spectacularly last year. And, Argentina had a bit of a up and down games series against the French with their new coach. If ever there was an opportunity for South Africa to win the championship, this should be the year. Rassie is still there. He's now even more involved than he was before, with Jacques having gone now, and Tony Brown there, and Jerry Flannery. It's almost like if you don't dominate those teams this year, you're going to let a golden opportunity slip to be on the front foot. And I know if you're number 1 in the world, you're supposed to be dominant, everything, but it doesn't really translate to that. I mean, look at Ireland. They're not number 1 in the world, and they gave us a good run for our money. I would think, just in terms of going forward, yes, and also towards, building for the World Cup, is dominate this championship. Not just, settle for this and settle for that and learn a few lessons here or there, but dominate it and put them on the back foot, because it takes a while to overcome a sort of a psychological setback that you get by being dominated. That's my feeling about Rassie.
In my rugby fantasy, we dominate for a long time. We're a dynasty. We make everyone sad. We make them almost want to give up rugby. My problem with the reality of today's rugby world is it's so much parity. All the coaches are cross-pollinated. There's no IP anymore. Everyone knows everyone's stuff. Conditioning and science has meant that any team can put 15 guys on the field that are really good athletes, and they can put 8 people that are really monsters. So we don't have a monster advantage anymore. Everyone's big, everyone's quick. You can find 15 really tall guys in China. So like it's not about the depth. Depth is wasted in some ways. I've got 15 loose forwards that can start anywhere, so you can only play 3, or they can play 5. So I think the All Blacks run from 2008 to 2016 will not be equaled in our time going forward, because it's more professionalized. So the top team will not win 80% of their matches. The top team will win 65 to 70%, as long as they're winning the right matches at the right time, always defend home turf, and nick a few abroad. I think that's going to be what the recipe is to stay number one. What I would like is more dominance. I'd like it to be demonstrated. I want people to understand and acknowledge and bow at the throne of Buck Rugby. I want that, but I don't think it's going to happen the way the All Blacks had that for a while. I think there were a lot of things happening at one time for the All Blacks to be that dominant. And I don't see those things happening because rugby has grown. Because if you're not good enough to play here, then you go to Scotland, you become Duan van der Merwe. So there's a lot of like sharing of assets, and so it brings it up. Ireland can scoop 3 or 4 players from the Southern Hemisphere and make themselves better. I also think, to your point about Ireland, by the way, that it's about matchups. I'm reminded of a speech recently where Roger Federer was talking about his career, and he's like, a glittering career, unbelievably part of the GOAT conversation in tennis with Nadal and Djokovic. But when he analyzed how many points he actually won head to head, and it was like 51.2% of the points against these guys. It was just when those points happened. It was those points happening at Wimbledon. It was those points happening in rugby at a World Cup, when everyone's there, everyone wants it the most, and Federer is in the crowd at the World Cup. That's when you judge teams. So I just don't know if we're going to get what we want. And I think Rassie knows that. I think he has to handle contingencies. What if Frans Malherbe, Peter Siftotoy, Ibn Etzebeth, and Andre Pollard all went out at the same moment? Where are we then? Are we better than Ireland? We're probably not. So what do we have to do is plan B. I think Razor and those guys, Razor, Joe Schmidt, and Felipe Contepomi, everyone knows that about them. They have to have plan B. I think for the Boks, we want everything. We want Rassie to develop plan B, but put plan A on the field and win with plan A, but have plan B and plan C just in case we need it later.
Yeah, well, if you put it like that, everybody's got strong forwards and big forwards and fast backs and everything else. The difference lies in the nuances. The difference lies in taking a scrum from a mark and things like that. Then that comes down to the coach. So which I think at the end of the day, the players are now the pieces on the chessboard, and the grandmasters are playing against each other, and that's what it's going towards. You mentioned in our previous conversation, Rassie wanting to maybe be a lifelong Springbok coach, for example. Wants to be the Gary Kasparov of rugby, for that matter. Whoever's Marcus, whatever his surname was, the latest chess champion. I think it's going down to that. But enough of that. We beg to differ. I wanted to ask you about pressure. Of those 4 new coaches, and we talked about Rassie so far, who do you think is the most under pressure to perform? To really show that the appointment was a correct decision of the other 3. Let's call it that.
Razor, if you put if you got in everyone else's shoes and you put yourself firmly in the All Blacks' shoes and the All Black coach, one of the 2 most pressurized coaching appointments in the world besides the Springbok coach, Razor is being portrayed as the savior. They lost. Had they won, I would have a different answer. It would be on Rassie. But because they lost the World Cup and All Blacks have now been shut out 2 World Cups in a row, you have incredible players like Artie Savea who have not won a World Cup. The pressure's on Razor because the All Blacks don't lose very much. And there's a very big possibility, in fact, I would say probably they'll lose 2 in South Africa, in both Joburg and Cape Town. Do you know how rare it is for All Blacks to lose 2 matches in a row? And you saw what happened to Ian Foster when he lost one. He was on a knife's edge, and they actually clipped his wings. They brought in Joe Schmidt himself to fix it. And Jason Ryan and Joe Schmidt got all the credit, not Ian Foster. And Ian Foster was run out of town. He was, every single radio show in New Zealand was just destroying him, his psyche, his facial expressions. Why doesn't he get more mad? New Zealand is outside, they always have a very closed shop, but inside New Zealand, it is one of the most pressurized rugby environments you could possibly imagine. And Razor's always had it his own way. At the Crusaders, he just won because he had, sort of the Springbok version of two packs. He played test rugby. It always went his way. The weather was his way. He struggled against England. England did not look in any way dominated. England could have won one of those matches, probably should have won one of those matches, could have won two. And so you can imagine that if the All Blacks stumble at all, and by that I mean finishing third or second is completely out of character for the All Blacks in the Rugby Championship. The travel factor, with Argentina traveling 44 hours to get to their games, and with the Boks having 2/3 of their matches in Australasia versus 1/3 for the other guys, it's always traditionally favored the All Blacks. So if Razor has a bad Rugby Championship, the England series will be looked back at in a different way. The World Cup loss will be looked at as a failure. We have no locks. There's no locks to replace Brodie Retallick and Sam Whitelock. There will be a doom and gloom. And let's say that Razor does badly on the end of year tour. His head will be on the chopping block. Make no mistake about it. There is not the same permutations I can think of where Rassie's head, the star of the Chasing the Sun, the biggest figure in rugby, beloved, done all of his, everyone in the ministries is okay with him, with all the things he's done. He's a star. Razor would be looked at as, he wasn't really ready for test rugby. It turns out that club rugby is different from test rugby. And maybe we should have had an assistant in test rugby take the throne instead of elevating someone straight from club rugby. That'll be the narrative. I'm not saying it'll happen, but if it did happen, Razor will be, everyone's favorite whipping boy. There's a lot of jealousy and animosity from the North Island to the South Island in New Zealand. It's just like a North-South derby kind of rivalry in South Africa, same in New Zealand. So there'd be plenty of people with their knives out and say, we should have hired Joe Schmidt. So if Joe Schmidt is the architect of Razor's doom and wins the Bledisloe back, that is one narrative we're looking forward to here is Joe Schmidt knows the All Blacks inside and out. He just took them and made them better. So, I think we're underestimating how much New Zealand believes in its divine right, its sovereignty. They're not finished. They don't think that that 12-11 match really settled as much as we do.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the circumstances are slightly different to when Ian Foster, underperformed in Nelspruit. Because it was a year before the World Cup. He was the latest in a line of coaches taking over from one another. It was Graham Henry and Steve Hansen and Ian Foster, sort of a natural progression. It was always succession in place. Razor is a complete about turn. It's a complete house clean, if you want, cleaning of the house, making sure everything is looked at, inspected, investigated, every rock is looked under. I think to a degree, the maverick character that Razor is, they sort of see him as their Rassie, innovative, a bit out of the box thinking, and he's going to give him more leeway, or maybe rope to hang himself with, if you want to call it that, but to what I think a typical successor to the previous All Black coach would have had. And I mean, they've lost it now. It's not like they're defending their title or anything. I think give it a year or so, and we'll talk again. But I think initially, especially now, Razor's going to get a lot of, grace almost, if that's the right word. That's my feeling. I would say, I wouldn't say Joe Schmidt's under pressure. I think maybe Felipe Contemporaneous a little bit. For me, Rassie is under pressure. Number one, World Cup champion. Something to prove. Like I said before, the coaches are the weakest, or they're all new. I think he's got a lot on the line. He wants to be a lifelong coach. He might be the flavor of the month or the flavor of the past World Cup cycle for that matter. But, fame is a fickle thing. It turns around very, very quickly.
I think we agree on the fact that Felipe Contepomi and Joe Schmidt faced very little pressure. I mean, you'd have to be out of your mind to suggest the Wallabies could turn around from 2023, from 5 years of decline, and suddenly, win. So if he did win a Bledisloe, or even split that, or if he avoids wooden spoon and has a nice set of wins, maybe a win over the Boks, I think Joe Schmidt is fated as a hero. It's all part of the good news story. And as long as he can explain his losses, that they're part of an overall progression, that's okay too. I mean, he has to improve on being just mullered at Loftus a year ago. So, you can say, look, turn around. We didn't lose, the physical battle or whatever. Contepomi has some really great players. He has to figure out how to prop up his props, and he has to figure out what to do with Carreras as a playmaker. But I agree with you, it's really between Rassie and Razor. It's a fascinating duel between two very charismatic, bold, some would say aggressively arrogant guys. It's just that Rassie's been through the ringer. He's been punched. He's been punched in the face. He's been punched in the face and kicked in the nuts and left bleeding in the floor, banned. What has Razor ever gone through, in life, where it's besides a knee replacement surgery? And, people saying that his breakdancing is shit. What has he actually done where people go, no, your plans don't work. We don't like you. We don't want you. That's difficult. In Crusaderland, he got to build a system that wasn't so much about innovation, because the Crusaders played, quite frankly, Bok ball. I mean, that's what they did. They just had a big monster pack. Most of the All Black pack was there, and they rolled you, and they played territory. That's not going to work against Rassie, Farrell, maybe even Schmidt to some extent, because they can figure that stuff out. And you're not going to be dominant. Right now, if you think of, Hall of Fame, generational talents in the tight five of the All Blacks, nobody. When you think of the loose forwards, if Sam Cane could still come back in, it looks like he does want to come back in. That's weird. I don't think there's that ability to just roll over people. So I think Razor does have to go to more innovation. And it's not just about stopping mauls, which they'll do really well, and having a good line out. That's fine. But can he find a 12-13 combination that makes us think of the All Blacks? Sonny Bill Williams, Ma Nonu, Conrad Smith, Ben Smith. Where are these guys? Because for me, it's stagnant in the midfield. So we have one clue, which is Razor has named David Havili, which was somewhat of a surprise, and he's kept 5 fullbacks on his roster. So it looks like he's trying to think of attack. And my guess, this is my big guess, is that all the teams will be experimenting on attack in the Rugby Championship. I think, they've already proved they have defensive structures. Probably the Wallabies need to get better at that. But I think Rassie and Tony, Razor and his team, Joe, they work a lot on how can we score more quickly, and how can we score 3 or 4 tries in a test match.
Well, that comes neatly to my next point, and that is, we were talking about squad depth, and the most important thing is what type of game are any of these teams going to be playing? And let's talk about the Springboks specifically. You mentioned Tony Brown. I've been talking about Tony's way, or Tony Ball. Not completely different, but substantially different to the extent that a lot of speed is involved. The flankers are on the tram lines. The 8 is a bit overexposed. He needs support from the hookers and the centers. So firstly, before we talk about what team Rassie wants to build, we need to discuss what game Rassie wants to play. Just briefly, what do you think, what is the plan going forward for the Springboks? What type of game can we expect from them?
I think the planks of the platform upon which Boks are built is always defense. And attack that comes from defense is the first plank of offensive structures. So I'm going to go back now a little bit and think about that try at Twickenham that Willemse catches a high ball and sets Kurtley Arendse free. It's sort of like Arendse's coming out party, where he started scoring lekker tries and didn't stop scoring lekker tries as a lekkerback, and he turned Marcus inside out. The creation of space inside that move came from nothing. It was really just kind of a nothing kick. And so I think the first platform of what Rassie Tony Ball needs to be is really following on from what already existed under Felix and under Stick, which is this idea of turning these micro opportunities into tries. So some people can look at that and the tries in Loftus and say, no, it doesn't count because it wasn't built from structure. Counter is structure. Willie is really good at organizing people. Willemse is good at putting people free. And if you give a team like the Boks under this new regime any kind of sniff, they seem to be able to convert. So I think that's the first one. So it's the same as, but I think they want to get better. And the better part is Tony Brown at the Highlanders was always really good at keeping the ball alive on advantage. So the Boks do win advantage with their style of grinding play, with their work at the ruck, and they're very clean but physical forwards. So that usually it ends up generating penalties. But right when you get a penalty and the ball's still in play, under Tony, they're going to not want to just kick the ball speculatively a la Fourie Dupree and win the penalty and then take the shot. They want to use that as go time. And they want everyone to flood the zone. Almost like everyone needs to turn into a maniac with their hair on fire and start running down channels. That is how All Blacks did that dominance, right? Because they would turn so many loose kicks from a Lambie or a Pollard or a Mornay Steyn into points. And we sit around watching our TVs going, no, we lost it at the end. So that's a design play, is counterattack turning into design play, as opposed to, oh, moment of brilliance, Willie saw something no one else did. No, it's actually a design where the right people are in the right place to do that. The second part of that is kick chase is still there, but the kick chase is organized with a giant, like a net that catches things, like you're going fishing. So you have a Peter Steph toy, you have a bouncer, a fetcher, and a flyer, always chasing. And you wait, that's why you do the caterpillar, because you wait till you have everyone set up in the actual starting blocks like the Olympics, and then you go. Eben doesn't have to get beyond the ball, he just has to get around the ball and contest it, because you'd prefer to have Eben contesting a kick than Kurt Lee, actually. And then you want the scrap. You want a Delende, you want someone who can do something with scraps. That's the second piece. The third piece is what we've all been waiting for. And now that is the red zone setup attack. We have the ball, there's no advantage necessarily, but we have a good position, and we want to make the try happen with inside lines, with decoy runners, with blocker runners like Ireland does. Ireland runs an NFL offense. It's all illegal. I mean, it's not illegal because no one's whistling it, but it's kind of illegal. Like you couldn't set up your school's team to play that way because the ref would blow it up. So why aren't we doing more decoy runners? Why isn't that happening? Why is there not more loop arounds? So that's the stuff that I think that the pretty rugby that I think is coming our way. Now you're going to say to me, Mvia, will it work? And I'm going to go, I don't know. I don't know if we do Viet what everyone else does in Viet in that situation, because there's only one way to make that work, which is you've got to get to the second and third rucks on time, clean it, and there's just no way to get around it. Everyone's got a good on-the-ball player. Hookers can get over the ball. Centers can get over the ball. So you cannot just leave someone out there and then hope that it's going to work out for you. So that's what I would say is the Boks are looking at is the evolution of how can we get down into your 22 and actually come away with 7s instead of 3s.
Just a brief digression while we're talking about that. The other side of the coin is not what we want to do as Springboks, but do we tailor our teams? And you were talking about depth, and you talked about 3 levels of depth here. Do you think there's any move towards tailoring our teams towards a certain opposition? For example, play a Kurtley Arendse or a Mani Libbok against, for argument's sake, Australia, and then Pollard plays against New Zealand, because he will be a better counter to that kind of a game. Or do you think it's solely about what we do well and nothing to do what they're up to?
I think it doesn't matter when you're talking about playing a team like Australia right now, probably so much. But within the top 4, let's say the French, All Blacks, and Ireland, I do think beating the All Blacks is a very different proposition than beating France. And I do think that in some ways, beating the Irish has now diverged a little bit from beating the All Blacks. I think we used to think they were the same. So you put the same matrix, I think that's your question, template, I do a template, I do the best, so I win. I think those days are gone. I think you can even look how Ireland mixed it up and we struggled even from first game to second game. Just little subtle shift in the midfield shut down some holes. So yeah, I think the good news is the Boks are better positioned to play horses for courses than any other team. Like, we can put greater differences in back three than anyone else in terms of height, in terms of, so on the chase. So Kane and Moody chasing a kick versus Arendse chasing a kick is a different proposition. Moody's going to pretty much win every one-on-one leaping contest with any wing in the world or fullback. If you want to just play percentage ball and you want Pollard to be my organizer, we could do that. Or Sasha or Mani can come in and be, the world's most difficult to predict fly-off. So I do think we have choices. I think a loose forward maybe even the most stark, because when you look at the differences between Marco van Staden and Lowe versus Roux and Kwacha, and even throwing guys like Hanekom or Buthelezi, these are really Diamani from the Stormers. Like, these are very weird combinations you can throw out there. So it's almost like a spoiled for choice thing. And I can imagine that Tony's like a kid in a candy store when he thinks about what he could throw. But there's always someone in Bokland, and I don't know who it is right now, who says, let's just stick to the tried and tested thing that got us here. So I don't know what that's like behind closed doors. You might know better than me, but who's fighting and how they're fighting and how does that work? But I do think horses for courses. I've always advocated for a Northern Hemisphere version of the Boks, where on end of year tour you max out. So a guy like Tyrone Green gets thrown in the mix. You get people who are form players in the Premiership. You get people that maybe aren't really your long-term solution, but they're so bloody good playing in England right now, and they're just going to go down the road and play. So I've advocated for developing a squad that handles these friendlies. We still win, but it caps people so they don't get scooped, and you have someone almost residing there full time in the coaching setup, and you build, and you build around. It could be anyone. It could be Jacques Nienaber living in Ireland. But there's an ability to use the depth properly, because I kind of think in some ways we waste some of our depth because we just keep playing same guy over and over until one of them blows a hamstring.
Well, that's what this entire conversation is building towards. Who are we using there? Who's the actual depth? Another new variable that's now come into play, and Rassie pointed it out the other day, you actually mentioned to me, is the fact that most of our players haven't played Kiwis or Australians. They're not used to Super Rugby. They haven't played Tri Nations or Championship or nothing. You or she against Super Rugby. That's a completely new something to consider, don't you think?
Yeah, and so just on theory, on paper, this should favor our Boks because the ERC has more diversity in it. So if you're playing in the ERC, then you're playing against different types. You're going to play teams that do resemble the Reds, that do resemble the Blues. If you're playing in Japan, you're going to be up to the speed of playing against New Zealand and Australia. If you're playing in Premiership or France, then you're used to the grind and you're going to handle that. So you would think the Boks, having not played their friends from Australia and New Zealand for a while, can handle the shock of the speed or skill or whatever it's going to go on. It's not entirely clear when we look at teams that play a more skilled league, who then have to play, a barroom brawling, mugging team. And I'm not saying the Boks are dirty. I'm just saying the idea when someone coming at you en masse, like a battalion, like a tank of Eben, Pietersteph, Archier, plus Jasper hitting you all at the same time. It's not that easy to replicate that. And none of the Super Rugby teams besides the Blues play that kind of brand. And when I talk about the Blues, and they are physical, it's still, Patrick Tuipulotu, Akira Awani. They're not quite at the same level of test animal that Pietersteph du Toit is at. So I do think there's more of a shock waiting for the Wallabies when a guy like Tom Hooper, bless his soul, goes out there and just gets eaten because he's not ready. Like, who would he face on a weekly basis? Whereas even on derbies inside Super Rugby, derbies inside the ERC, or even in Currie Cup, you are adequately prepared for any physicality in the world. If you're just playing, Bulls versus Stormers, you're also ready to play against Fiji, Samoa, or whoever else is physical. If you're playing Reds versus Waratahs, you're not. It just doesn't. It doesn't compare. Can they compare on speed? Can Marika Korobetti run pretty quickly? Yes. Will that be difficult to contain? Absolutely. But then you get into the issue of what the Boks have gained by going into the ERC by South African rugby. South African rugby has gained something by playing so many Irish and Scottish teams, where not necessarily the speed on foot, but the speed of the ball is so quick. You look at Glasgow, you look at Edinburgh, you look at Munster, you look at Leinster. South African boys have now had to learn to contain that. And it's done is made, what we're best at, which is tackling. We're the best tacklers in the world. It's made our tackling even better. If you were tackling for someone's life, go to heaven or hell, you pick a Safa to tackle for you. Because we don't care, we're just gonna break our arm doing it. That is the level that I think all New Zealanders I know, every Kiwi I know in the know says, we really missed that. We're not properly tested. We never really knew if one of our young locks or props was good until they went to the Republic. And if they came back alive and happy, then we knew we had someone. And they became whoever, they became the Tony Woodcock. They became the Carl Heyman. They became the Kevin Mialamu, because they could withstand the Bismarcks and they could handle. I think that's what's waiting for the Wallabies in this particular Rugby Championship. But again, I think Joe has alibis, Joe has excuses. They're built in, so I think he can survive. And he has overseas players he could bring in. He's not bringing them in at all. So this is like Joe Schmidt saying to his guys, we're going to see how good you are against the Boks. At home in Australia, sure. But still, you can imagine some young number 7, first time in open sider. Luke Reimer is being spoken about, someone having a debut. Seru Uru. These guys have never actually faced, a Malcolm Marx in a bad mood.
All right, now we've now set the stage. We now know what we're looking for, and we know what to expect and everything. Just one last question on that subject. Do you think when we talk about depth, we should talk about mostly Australia to start off with, the first 2 games being away from home? Russ has made it quite clear when we come back, a guy like Evan Roux would have been back in the running if he wasn't injured like he is now, going for an operation, I heard. So do you think we must stick to maybe a squad depth situation for Australia only, or maybe look at the entire championship?
That's the most interesting thing. This is part of the I don't knows. If you look at the big level look, and what I did is I just went through all the probables and possibles and so forth, and I found the positions where we really do need to get someone. So hooker is one of those places, and hooker against Australia is not a bad shout because they don't have a really strong line-out. They're not really good line-out stealers with the guys I got, Nick Frost, LSL, Jeremy Williams, kind of an unknown guy for South Africans. There's not really the Fassler and Pollard, the guys for Australia at hooker. They're not really dynamos. So if you're going to try to see a Grobs and see what Khobola does, or try to test someone out, it's not a bad idea against Australia. You probably don't want to have a hooker throwing against a line-out against the All Blacks at home at Ellis Park. It just seems like one of those ideas that could end a career or stick in their brain forever. Money someone, where they're going to have mental problems about throwing into a line-out. Yeah, it's very similar. Like Dweba had that same kind of. Once it's in your head, it's difficult to come out. But Bongi is 33. Marx is 30, but he's a hard 30. He's got a lot of mileage on those knees. So yeah, you look at a guy 26 years old, mature, Probelar. I think you look at prop depth, that's not a problem. Our problem is like Wilco Low doesn't make a team where he would make every other team in the Northern Hemisphere. But I think you still want to see, at France being 33 and Vincent being 34, I do think you want to see exactly what that looks like. And if you're relying on swing props, this appears to be something that Rassie is interested in, is having versatility where props can play across the front row and hookers can even play prop, and back 3 can interchange. I get all that. but you still want a tight head prop. I mean, we'll miss Frans Malherbe more when he's gone than we realize when we have him, because there's just something about a guy who gives you a plus 34 penalty edge over his Bok career. That's what I've worked out. I've gone back and worked it out. People make fun of that stat, but I think I'm correct that he gives you a plus 34 over his career. That means 34 entries, 34 exits. You got to look at prop depth. And Wilco's not that young either. So everyone that's sort of in that top three, I would think, is in their 30s. The other thing is, this also sounds very weird to us as South Africans, is locks. And I just think it's because when we talk about 4s and 5s, we talk about someone who can call a line out. We have missed Leeuward. I mean, I'm not going to say that the 12-11 would have been, 18-11 or something in the World Cup final, but it might have been with a guy like with Leeuward, because we love Sos, and Mostert's always going to work hard, but he's not the same physical presence, and he doesn't dominate lineouts. And when you have good, clean lineout ball from the back, that's so big. So, I think all these are questions that you're probably wrestling with in the coaching room. Is, do we see what it looks like for Roux to go in there, a young lock? When do we get Klein back? What do we do with the second half lineouts? Who's calling that?
No, that's a problem, because you talked about locks. Number 5 locks, we had Leeuward, then we had Sos, and then RG was sort of a 4 and a 5, and then only Roux. But now it seems like Roux might be the starting lock, number 5, because of his ability to call lineouts. Like you said, there's more than just physical domination. There's more to it than just that. And I think for South African team, we're pretty low on lock stocks, if I want to call it that. And then Eben is a clear favorite, and then Murat is sort of being groomed for something. I don't know why, as either a captain or something, but I don't think he actually belongs in the team on his ability at the moment. So I agree with you. In terms of our locks, we're in trouble a little bit, but like you said, against Australia, it's not a big line-out proponent, or whatever you want to call that. It's not too much of a worry. You want somebody that can call. Maybe Archie can come on as 5 in the second half and call that, but I'm not sure. That's a bit of a difficult one. I'm more interested in the loose forwards, because I talked right in the beginning when Tony's way started, being introduced to the world, and we saw Sia running over centers and Peter Steff, running a sprint down the sideline there, touchline. And then we said, poor Kwagga is being left at the back there. So we said, what is our ideal loose trio combination? And we typically would have said any given day, with the current stocks, it would have been Sia, Peter Steff, and now Jasper Wiese. Jasper Wiese is not available. So we left with Roux, who didn't convince either. There's a lot of discussion going on here in South Africa at the moment, whether he was tasked to do or to play a certain type of game, and then he was penalized for doing that and not shining and, not making meters or whatever. So now suddenly Aldrich Low is now the favorite number 8. The big question mark for me is Sia. Not as a captain, but as the number 6 flanker. Is he the right person still? Is he there because he's Sia Kolisi, or is he there because he's the right person, regardless of who we play against?
Yeah, I think you're right to jump there. It's on the tight forwards, it's just Bongi, Koch, Frans, and Sos that are 33 and above. And so in a way, we kind of know what we have to do, and there are people to fill in. And like you say, it's just a matter of, is RG going to become a starter or not? If RG is a starter, then actually everything else kind of falls in place, because Mostert was always really good off the bench as an energy guy, and then you can figure out where to use Roux. But the loose forward conundrum is actually more thorny, because you have a captain, a beloved captain, with the highest Instagram following in the world besides a sevens rugby player for America, a woman. So there's all that. There's political angles. There's morale angles. Sia is definitely one of those guys who can get the best out of other people. It's underrated, that skill. You also have a guy like Peter Steff who could probably play any of the back 5 in a pack. I mean, you could put Peter Steff at 8. He played 8 plenty, actually, at schools and in Western Province, and then at Sharks. So there is ways to mix and match this, but it all begins with Sia. So Sia is 33. He's coming home because his owner called him fat.
And transparent.
Yeah, I think you meant invisible. But anyway, and so he's coming home, but he's 33. So that means, is he 37 and going onto the pitch? I mean, very few loose forwards play 37. Locks can sometimes because they can guard their body a little bit more. Maybe a prop can sometimes because scrums are so important. But getting around at 6, open side-ish, that's tough at 37. So do you start looking at a guy, as what's understudy? And we don't really have a natural understudy fetcher. We have plenty of blind sides and 8s. Visa, Low, Roux, Buthelezi. The list goes on and on. Hanekom coming back. Marco is sort of maybe the closest. Eskom is probably the closest. But, Eskom has 20 caps. He's always rugged. He's never let the team down. He's sort of like Marcel Coetzee, but more rugged. I think we're looking at potentials here that we don't know about. I talked to a guy who's a really top pundit this morning, Paul Cully. He writes for New Zealand Stuff and Dominion. And he said if Kwagga was not playing 8 for the Boks, he's Irishman, by the way, living in New Zealand. If Kwagga was not playing for the Boks at number 8, the Springboks would have won both tests handily. It was that important. Because he just said a gain line 8, a proper South African 8, the kind of 8 that we all around the world wish we had. We get your second best and we like them, CJ Stander, would have been a big game changer. And so that's kind of what could have been, what might have been. But now, we worry about Rassie's stubbornness. Like, no, guys, I'm going to show you my beloved Kwagga is going to do it. That double down personality. I think it's a big mistake. Rob Bellatini for the Wallabies could play number 8 or Harry Wilson, but Bellatini is one of the best Wallabies. He's the best Wallaby. He is just as good as Kalen Doris. If Bellatini was playing on a really good team, he'd be one of those guys talked about as, world 15. He's really good. He can take Kwagga and just carry him. He can put him on his back and run with him. So, there's some real physical mismatches there. I don't know. It's actually, maybe Visa is the big winner out of this whole discussion. Maybe we liked Visa better than we thought we did. We always thought that he was kind of a limited guy. He was just a fire plug. He was a guy that would run up the middle, but I kind of like Visa now.
Yeah. No, you just mentioned it before, earlier. You never know what you have until you don't have it anymore. So there's Visa. I remember that final, when he picked up that final ball in the scrum and just hung on to it for dear life. Remember, this kind of thing, guy gives everything for the team. I was mentioning there before, you mentioned Hanekom, but just as a very interesting aside, someone who's put up his hand shouting loudly, pick me, is Pila Gumere here by the Bulls in the Currie Cup. Game after game is just exceptionally good, scoring individual tries from breakdowns. I don't know, big, physical, fast. Johan said to me the other day he's a bit lazy in terms of breakdown work and the likes, but I like that guy. I rate him.
So I think Rassie and his brain trust have to make the big decision about, are we playing Sia to finish out an amazing career, 85 caps, get him to 100, but our real plan is, behind closed doors, that at the end of 2025 or the beginning of 2026, he phases out a succession plan, but dignified, like respectful, giving Sia his due, but working in a guy like Ben Jason, working in a guy like Elrich, figuring out how to get Cam Hanekom on the pitch at the same time as those guys, because you can imagine a loose trio for South Africa that's just lightning, just like athletes all over the show, Buthelezi, Hanekom, and Low, or Roux. I mean, this is ridiculous stuff. So I don't know if it comes now because of the Kolisi factor. I also think Peter Steff at 79 caps is staring down the barrel of a Centurion career, one of the great Boks in history, in my opinion. So I know that Springbok lore and the way we think about philosophical stuff is, it's really important to treat your old guys properly. And we didn't get here by always being the flavor of the month. We got here by having continuity. And there's something about looking across this list and saying, when you come down to one final scrum and Kitshoff is looking across at France because they played together at schoolboys, in between them is just a guy who will chop his head off for you, Bongi. There's something to that, even if there's someone else quicker, prettier, got something going, like trendier. So I do think there's this age-old debate inside Buckland is, how do we bring the new guys in? If I was to guess, they really love Eskom. I think they like Marco van Staden's ability to come in and change a game. I think they'd like him to have more than 20 caps. I think they like him to have 35 caps by the time World Cup runs around. And my gut tells me that Ben Jason Dixon has really caught their fancy on work rate. They just want to see what he can do against more proper opposition. And by that I mean, Peter Omani is not really at the top of his game in terms of physicality, and Portugal is not the same as All Blacks. So until you play the All Blacks, or maybe Ireland in Ireland, it's interesting to see what Ben Jason Dixon can do. But I think he's part of the mix. And the other one is trying to figure out, is there a Quagga starter type, or is Quagga-ness really a bench issue? It's just like, is that just a bench player who allows you to do 7-1 or 6-2? And then take that as it is. Stop trying to, try to double it down or triple down and say, and so what about if we start with a guy who's too light and quick?
No, but I've said it many times before. This new game way of playing is, you've suddenly got Quagga there on his own. Like you said, he was tackled backwards by Caelan Doris many times in the two tests, and then you had to have guys step up and shoulder the load a little bit. No, I don't think so. So do you think Elrich Lowe might cut it? Maybe longer term?
Well,
not necessarily.
Lowe's got the mentality. Lowe's got the body. He can also play across the pack. He can actually play in a pinch at lock. He's tall. He's got good sense about him. Mm-hmm. So I think, but I don't think the jury has decided Roux Lowe yet. I think we're getting a little bit too caught up in the Roux dropping, because there was a Lowe dropping before the Roux dropping, and I think it's the perfect thing. It's a laboratory experiment by Professor Rassie, the mad scientist. He's like, so what if I make you feel sad? What do you look like then? And what if I insult your mother? What happens next? Like that kind of stuff. And he's just playing with them and seeing which one of them will just lose it and then like basically disqualify themselves, or are they going to be good soldiers? And look, I got to give credit to both of those guys. They look like they're putting their best self on the line. This is the best version of me, Coach Rassie. Come on, Rassie, put me in. Mm-hmm. So I think that jury has not been decided. I think Ben Jason, though, was the one. If you looked at one player who nobody was talking about a year ago on loose forward stocks, and now you say, and I think it was not just the fact that he was on 79th minute picking and going. I think it was that he did all the dirty stuff. He was like, head down, get into the meat factory. I'll put my arm in the grinder, and I think people didn't know that about him because he wasn't used that way by the Stormers. Yeah.
Many players have not been used that way by the Stormers, including Evan Roux. When they take the step up to the box, suddenly there seems to be a bit of a disconnect almost, don't you think?
Yeah, except that, we can still scrum you into tomorrow. But no, I think you're right about loose forwards. I think the crowds at Newlands and Cape Town Stadium have always wanted, more Bishop ball than Blue Bull ball. So they do want to swing it around. Who's to say? I think it's actually good for South Africa to have the two franchises playing differently. Mm-hmm. I disagree with some of the pundits who say that the success is paved by having unanimity and coherence. I don't think that's true. I think, New Zealand, the most successful team, has always had differences between the Crusaders and the Hurricanes. And so you get a Chris Cullen, or you get a Izzy Dag, or you get a TJ Perenara. They come from different, and then you put them together, that's the magic. The magic of putting Stormers and Bulls together, these best of rivals, best of frenemies, get together and say, now what's the spice like? I think that's good. And then you throw together the sort of unique physical talents that we get from elsewhere. I just think the loose forward conundrum is the problem for the Rassie Co to solve, because there's not one Dwayne Vermeulen prototype that you can just stick in that you recognize. There's a couple of people that look like they could be Pierre Spies, And there's a couple of people who look like they could be maybe down the road for Mullen. But Dwayne was always really good at reading the game. I think that's the part that you want to see from the young pups is can you see the game? Can you read the referee? Can you see what we need right now? And can you turn the game to your advantage? The one that does look like that to me, by the way, you'll love this, and I'm mad at you for that, is Honeycomb. Honeycomb looks like, to me, the guy who could do that. He could, like, the full package, the Caelan Doris type, who, at times Doris put Ireland on his back during those two tests. And he just said, follow me. I might even do something wrong, but we're gonna take this game and pull it back.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Hanekom is that physical, is physical enough, like Dwayne Vermeulen. I saw him at Loftus the other day. He's not that big. He's not a big guy, but yeah. And he's been injured twice this past season, and long injuries. So hopefully he can stand up to it. All right, so I think I agree with you in terms of Sia. They're going to manage him into the sunset slowly. Surely there's too much riding on his presence in the team. He might even be used as a sort of a mentor, maybe going forward. We'll have to see what happens there. All right, so that's sort of the pack. I'm quite happy with that side of it. More important to me now is the playmakers at the back. I talked about quarterbacks the other day, 9, 10, and 15. Let's talk about the 9s. There's quite a few of them overseas. Not as many as we took to the World Cup, but your candidates, what do you think?
Yeah, so this is an interesting position. It's a wealth. It's unbelievable. You look back 5 years ago, and there was this kind of consternation that we had about, well, who's the natural successor to Farida Priya? And Faf was reviled by people for being too crazy or too box kicky. And there was, Faf getting criticized for things the coaches were telling him to do, which I try not to do that. Same thing about Pollard sometimes. Kobus Reinach, I think, is right now, how old is he? He's 34 years old. So we have a 32-year-old and a 34-year-old. Then we have this pack of this crew, really, the squad of unbelievable speed and quickness and special talents. Even take a guy like Jaden Hendrickson, who's kind of out of the mix right now. But, I mean, the guy has serious skills. But on top of that, I guess the depth chart, you're looking at guys like Williams, who you wonder if he was in that 100 meters Olympics final, would he be in the picture? He might be. He might be just outside of that frame. But he was very quick.
Yes, that frame, yeah.
He's actually at a perfect age. He's 28. So he's the kind of guy who's seen enough now, and you think that there might be a way to jump up. I know there's a young pup in the squad as well, and we'll see. I don't know whether Van den Berg was even thinking about this when he started the year in rugby, but he's got a special opportunity as well with Faf being ailing. I think the situation here is about style more than substance. If you want to play a certain way, Williams is your man. If you want to play another way, de Klerk is your man. And then Kobus can sort of do both. He's sort of a hybrid of those two. So I think we're well positioned. I'm not worried about this. I think that there's even some people coming up in Currie Cup and in Urk for the next 4 or 5 years where 9 is the least of our problems.
Yeah. The 9 is not the problem. The 9 is, and that's my favorite bugbear, sitting at in the stands and don't kick, like you just said now. And he's been told to kick people. That was the plan for how many years? Wake up, smell the roses. Fly-offs, what did you think? I'm a big advocate of throwing Sasha in at the deep end, but there's a lot of faith in Manie, looks like.
Yeah, and also we get back into culture issues, which is I don't want to have my team be so nervous if they're over a certain line. If you've got 20 caps, 25 caps, and you've done really good things, you don't want to feel like I make one mistake or one thing goes wrong and the new guy comes in. At the same time, I don't think Manie has actually ever cemented that spot as much as people might think. I mean, 15 caps in, this is not like where you own the jersey. It's a big thing to say to a 71 cap vice captain, Andre Pollard, who has been a winner from the time he's been young to now. Now we're done with you because we want you to be more flashy. But that would be a big deal. But I think to say to Manie, there's a guy who does what you do, but he does the other things you don't do better. I want to see more of that. It's just foolish. Mani has never shown himself to be a bitter guy or a non-team guy anyway. And I think he would stay in the mix, in the larger mix. But at 27 years old, with 15 caps and an Achilles heel, which is the kicking tee, which then forces you to make other decisions around 15, why don't you just go with a 22-year-old guy who, it looks like could be a generational talent? As my Kiwi friend Paul Cully said this morning, he won the genetic lottery. I mean, Sasha just looks like what's wrong with that guy? There's nothing. He probably could win the swimming in Olympics. So, yeah, I think you go in there and you try to find a way to get him places. Where are those places? I actually go counter. I like dropping Sasha against the All Blacks. I want to see. Let's break him or not. Let's see what's his break point, because I have no doubt with someone with that sort of genetic, athletic confidence will rise to the occasion. And if for some reason it doesn't work out for him, like he drops a pass or he kicks out of bounds, he's going to come back the next week stronger because he's going to get mad. I like that kind of guy. We dropped Pollard in at 20. Why not Sasha at 22? That's where I would go. I think you already know what you get with Mani. I don't think putting him in pressure situations to kick off a tee is going to make it better right now. I'd almost think having a bit of a sabbatical from kicking is what he needs, and sit down with a proper kicking coach. I mean, a real kicking coach, and who can talk about the exact region of the ball that he wants his shoelace to address. That kind of technical stuff. That takes, when Tiger Woods redid his swing, it took 6 months before he could kick well, before he could hit well.
Yeah. I think once again, as we're coming down to the Stormers, using Mani as their first choice fly-off. And if Sasha is going to be the future star, there's another problem there. I mean, there's going to be some calls that have to be made.
Yeah, well, Keon Frawley wasn't used by Leinster, and guess who beat us in Durban? Is a guy that Andy Farrell said, I see this guy better than you do at Leinster, Leo Cullum. The really good test coaches can see things in players that their club coaches don't. They can even put them in different positions. So I think at some point, if Sasha is getting more and more game time for the Boks and becomes the obvious understudy, or then when Pollard cannot play and he takes the reins and has a famous victory over Ireland in Dublin, what's Dobbs going to do? Dobbs is going to follow suit because the new star will be here. I don't think Dobson has any problem with that. I just think that Mani is a leader at club level, and he's not a leader at test level. So I think it's different. I think the time is now for Sasha.
Well, the interesting thing about Sasha is that when we talk about three different positions in the back line, it's fly-off, center, and fullback. Sasha's in the mix in every one of those. And the question is, where does he fit the best? Somebody asked us the other day, I talked about it. What happens to if Dale Ender falls out? We don't have a physical number 12. You mentioned maybe move Pollard to number 12, or Andre Estreisen is always there, or maybe Sasha for that matter. But I'm more interested in a playmaker position like 15. Now, we can't use Willemse because he's injured, and Willie, hopefully he's going to be okay. Sasha as a 15 then, for that matter, as a playmaker, is that a long-term proposition?
It could be. On that, Willemse is actually recovering quicker than they thought he would, and will be back, I think, this year, maybe a little bit ahead of schedule. And I think if everyone were healthy, Willemse actually is the incumbent 15. He's ahead of Willie. I think Willie is in the same position as Sia in that how much time does Willie have left? He's 34. Does he play at 38 in the World Cup in Australia? I don't think so. And I don't think Willie wants to either. So let's say that he has these 2 years where he continues to mentor, probably goes into the coaching setup in some way. Then we can see. But I think Willemse's out there. Sasha's future, is it more at 10 or 15, I think is your question. It's probably more at 10 in the end, because if you go forward to 2027 and you have a 26-year-old fly off Sasha with seasoned maybe player of the year, world player of the year, Willemse, at fullback, and you put those two on. How hard are they to handle? I mean, that's athletic superiority. There's no one, Sexton, Murray, can they even hold a candle to Willemse and Sasha? There's no way. I mean, in every way, they're going to be the guys you pick. If you go to the field and you want to just pick up rugby from, shirts and skins, you're going with Willemse and Sasha, and they're going to dance around you. So I do think that's the future, and that's also the future of Bok. If Bok superiority becomes a thing, it's because we harness better the extreme athletic edge. You get people who have incredible speed in hands and aerials. You tap into the fact that, when you look at the 100 meters in the Olympics and you see who's coming across the line, you have Botswana, South Africa right there in the mix. Who else is out there that's not playing rugby right now, who's 15 years old or 14 years old, who can run 100 meters in less than 10 meters? I want them on the field. And right now, with Colby, Arendse, Willemse, Sasha, there's people who they're just better athletes, is the bottom line.
Well, I see Akanis and Beanies. We must go, offer him a scrum cap, see if we can make him a lekkerback. I can't believe a guy runs 9.82 seconds and don't medal. I mean, really.
That's crazy.
Incredible. All right. You just mentioned the wings there. I'm not too worried about them. I think they're a sort of a shoe-in. Maybe the only question mark a little bit about Mapimpi might be a bit older. Well, how old is he now? 33. Yeah, himself. Yeah. So, but Edwin van der Merwe is there. He's not that young either. He is, 28, but I mean, he's still going to be only 32 in 4 years' time. I'm more interested in the number 13 position. I think that's the last, I don't want to call it conundrum, but that's the last one where there's a big, I don't want to call it competition or a question mark between and Kriel, the warrior. What do you think?
So of all the positions that I looked at across 4 World Cups, the 3 that have gone by and the one that's coming, it's interesting because, Eben, Malherbe, Pollard is the constant there. And then you look up and you say, look at that midfield. Basically, if you're going beyond Kriel, and Dukes, Delende, that's an amazing percentage of actual important tests. Just taking important tests. So test for something. That is the clear choice. It's either Jesse or it's Lucanio, and it's Damien. That's it. There is no other team in rugby that I can look across and find. It's not even Fiku and Danty for France because Danty's injured a lot. The All Blacks they still don't know who the 13 is. They're still trying to find it, actually. That's amazing. So could we be so lucky because Kriel and Damien were so young in 2015 that it falls just right? And the answer is maybe. It may be possible for a guy with Jesse's physique, arms skill, and Dielende's just freaking grit. I mean, every player in the Boks says that Damien is one of the best Boks on the team. Every time you really need something, Dukes is there. He's got this ability to not get tackled very easily. His presentment stats are off the roof. He doesn't get pilfered. You just don't pilfer him. You don't take the ball away from him. And when he presents, his presentment sticks. So that's a huge loss. This is in the category of you'll only miss them when they're gone. For all the bashers of Jesse, Damien, there's no bashers of Lucanio. We just wish he was on the field more. But the bashers of those 2 first guys, okay, find me a better one right now. That's the goal of Rassie and Co. I was interested that no one really went on this tour, that he might have used, like an Ethan Hooker or someone else to look at. I just, give me a look. To your suggestion, there are people you can move over there, but you don't want to I don't want to pet Sasha at 12. He's going to get hit really hard. I want to see him at 15 because he has some time and space.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right. The only thing about those 2, Delende and Kriel, that I want to mention, the fact that they're playing in Japan, and what is Damien now, 32, and Kriel is 30. The fact that playing in Japan will prolong their shelf life, if I want to call it that. I think that's going to make them reach it. Yeah.
That's clear. I think that's what's making me think Peter Steph could get to the Australian 27 as well, because just playing in Japan, the way they eat, the way they rest, the way they're treated, not just physical, but the lack of mental stress. You can kind of walk down the street and no one bothers you. And there's not like, doom and gloom because you missed the kicks and now you're done. I think they can just kind of survive there well. I guess the one question I have, besides, we've talked about Salman Murat and his need to show something in this championship. For me, Fassi is the guy they might want to put on the field as well. He's not for everyone's taste. He still, in a way, looks like he's reading the game. But he also has that, what we'll call physical edge, where if you give him any space at all, with that length and that stride, he can just find places no one else can get to. And once he's gone, he's gone. There's no one in the Wallabies who can catch him. Rieko Ioane could ankle tap him, but it'd be like desperation. I think he's just quicker. So that's something that I know the Boks coaches are in love with. They're in love with things that you cannot produce and are uncoachable, but then I can try to make it better. Because it's nice to work from this base of, if Fassi starts, the same line as someone else, who in World Rugby can catch him right now? I don't know of anyone.
All right, so with all that, I think we've covered everything fairly well. What would you think would be never mind what Rassie thinks, what would you think would be a successful Rugby Championship for South Africa?
To beat the All Blacks twice in South Africa, to conquer the hoodoo over Australia by sweeping them, and by not just beating Argentina, but I think putting them in their place. So a complete sweep would be successful. Anything less than that is actually not satisfactory. I just think everyone survives it, the coaching crew, because they have excuses that seem plausible, and they have 2 World Cups in their pocket. But I don't want any excuses. I actually want those games against the All Blacks to be where some of these players get over any phobia they have, or any stigma they have, or any kind of mentality they have, that the All Blacks come back and disappoint and beat us. I want it to be like a real proper thumping. And then on Australia, I think it's actually really disappointing when you look at the record over the last 6-7 years. It's been really atrocious. So set the record straight, rectify it.
Yeah, back to rectification. There we go. We've heard that one before. All right, time for our regular discussion about what would he have been if he wasn't a professional rugby player. And this week I was thinking maybe tell us what Willie would have done. He seems to be a master manager there from the back. Tell us what you think.
Yeah. Let's see. Willie strikes me as a guy who would get a sales job of some kind, and every day of every week, his boss is telling him, "Stop being so grumpy." But at the end of every month, you look at Willie and he sold the most buckies. Relentless, persuasive, a little bit cheeky, and tapping into what you don't like. The kind of salesman who finds what you hate and then he sells around that instead of finding what you love. Just taking you around a bucky and say, "What do you hate about everything?" And then you say it and he goes, "Okay, I've got one for you." No, Willie's my guy. I think he's one of the people I love to watch the most. And love him or hate him, you cannot take your eyes off him on a rugby pitch. And so I think he's the perfect sales guy.
Yeah, no, he'll spot the gap, exactly like you said. This is a weakness I'll identify. All right. Thanks, Harry. That was a long discussion. I appreciate it, man. We'll talk soon.
This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and MV Velman.